On a crisp autumn morning in the manicured suburb of Willow Crest, the sun spilled golden light across lawns, so perfect they looked painted, and the air carried the faint sweetness of honeysuckle. This was the kind of place where every driveway had a gleaming SUV, where the local coffee shop knew your order by the sound of your footsteps, and where the biggest drama usually involved someone forgetting to recycle properly. But for 12-year-old Ethan Carter, that morning was different. He wasn't thinking about the neighborhood's unspoken rules or the way the mailboxes all matched the trim on the houses. He was thinking about the people he'd seen every day that week 3 figures huddled at the edge of the community park, near the rusted bus stop no one used anymore. 2 men and a woman, their clothes threadbare, their faces weathered by a life Ethan couldn't imagine. They were invisible to most, but not to him. Ethan had woken up early, slipping into the kitchen before his parents stirred. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves his mom, a nurse, had drilled hygiene into him since he could walk, and started making sandwiches. Nothing fancy, white bread, peanut butter, a smear of grape jelly. He packed them into a small blue cooler, the kind his family used for picnics, and headed out. His sneakers crunched on the gravel path as he approached the trio. "Hey," he said softly, holding out a sandwich wrapped in foil. "I thought you might be hungry." The woman looked up first, her eyes wide with surprise, then softening. One of the men, his beard streaked with gray, took the offering with a nod. "Thanks, kid," he muttered, his voice rough but kind. Ethan smiled, handing out the rest. For a moment, it felt good, simple, right? Then came the rumble of tires on asphalt. A black SUV rolled up, its windows so dark they swallowed the light. A crisp Willow Crest HOA logo emblazoned on the side. The doors swung open, and 2 men stepped out, their navy polo shirts stretched tight over broad shoulders, badges dangling like medals they hadn't earned. One clutched a clipboard, the other already had his phone out, recording. "Step away from the Indy VY duels, sir," the taller one barked, his tone absurdly formal for addressing a kid in a hoodie. Ethan froze, the cooler dangling from his hand. "I'm just GIVYing them food," he said, his voice small but steady. The clipboard guy didn't blink. "You're engaging in unsanctioned distribution on private property. This creates a public nuisance. We've had complaints." Ethan glanced at the 3 people on the bench. The woman was clutching her sandwich, tears streaking her face, not from joy now, but fear. "But they're hungry," he protested. The taller one smirked. "You're encouraging loitering. Do you understand the implications?" Ethan didn't. He was 12. They didn't ask for his name or call his parents. Instead, they marched him hands firm on his shoulders, not quite dragging, but closed down the pristine sidewalk to the HOA's headquarters, a sleek building with glass doors and a sign that read, "Unity through Order." Inside, they sat him in a sterile office, motivational posters about accountability glaring down at him. Clipboard guy slid a form across the desk. Infraction citation 042B, unauthorized distribution and promotion of congregation. Below it, in sharp handwriting, punishment, 3 weeks of community rehabilitation SARE VYC. Report to Mrs. Diane Voss at 3 p.m. tomorrow. "Don't be late," the man said, then waved him out. Ethan trudged home, the empty cooler swinging at his side, his chest tight with confusion. Had he done something wrong? He didn't tell his parents that night. He just went to bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment those sandwiches turned into a crime. The next day, at exactly 3 p.m., Ethan pushed open the glass doors of the HOA building. The air inside was sharp with lemon polish and something colder authority. Maybe Diane Voss, the HOA president, stood waiting, her presence as unyielding as the steel frames of her glasses. She was tall, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her lips painted a shade of red that didn't match her smile. Punctual. "Good," she said, her voice clipped. "But being on time doesn't erase the mess you made." Ethan shifted his weight. "What mess?" Diane raised an eyebrow, flipping through her clipboard with a flourish. "Feeding vagrants without permission? You've disrupted our community's standard sanitation, safety, property values. You and VY Ted chaos." She led him through a back door to a concrete patio where 6 people sat in a row of plastic chairs, their faces etched with exhaustion. One was the gray-bearded man from the bus stop. He gave Ethan a faint nod, but his eyes were wary now. Diane thrust a pair of yellow rubber gloves and a rag into Ethan's hands. "Your first task," she said, her tone eerily casual, "is to clean them. Arms, faces, feet, whatever they'll let you touch. They're a blight on Willow Crest, and since you brought them here, you'll fix it." Ethan's stomach lurched. "You want me to wash people?" Diane's smile tightened. "You wanted to play SAVY, or now take responsibility. If you're so eager to help, prove it." A staff member rolled up a cart, bottled water, sponges, a spray bottle labeled sanitizing solution, a stack of thin towels. This was an aid. It was a spectacle. Ethan stood there, gloves limp in his hands, staring at the 6 people who looked back with a mix of shame and resignation. "Go on," Diane urged, stepping back to watch. "Show us your compassion." He didn't want to do it, but he didn't know how to refuse. So he started with the gray-bearded man, dipping a sponge in water, running it gently over his dirt-streaked arms. The man didn't flinch, just stared ahead, muttering, "You're a good kid." Ethan's throat burned. He moved to the next person, then the next, each touch feeling like an apology he couldn't voice. Diane watched, arms crossed, her phone out now recording. Later that night, she posted the video to the HOA's private forum, a lesson in accountability our youth can learn. The comments rolled in. "Finally, some discipline. This is what Willow Crest needs." Ethan saw it on his mom's laptop when she left it open. He didn't sleep that night. At home, things unraveled quietly. Ethan's father, Daniel Carter, was a federal prosecutor, a man who'd spent decades chasing justice in courtrooms from Seattle to San Francisco. His mother, Laura, ran a small pediatric clinic, her life built around healing. They didn't notice the change in Ethan at first, always been quiet, introspective. But then Laura found the citation crumpled in his backpack. "Ethan, what's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He told them everything, his words spilling out in a rush, his hands shaking as he described the gloves, the sponge, Diane's cold smirk. Daniel's face darkened, his fist slamming the kitchen table so hard a coffee mug toppled and shattered. "They made you wash people," he roared. Laura grabbed his arm. "Dan, you can't storm over there. You're too high-profile, Ethiel twisted." She was right, and he knew it. But as he looked at Ethan, sitting there with hollow eyes, something shifted in Daniel. This wasn't a case. This was his son. The next afternoon, Daniel parked his sedan across from the HOA building, watching as Ethan knelt beside an elderly woman, hosing dirt from her cracked feet. Diane stood nearby, filming again, her laughter cutting through the air. Ethan's movements were mechanical, his face blank. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles blanched. He didn't storm in. He didn't shout. But that night, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel sat in his study with a legal pad and a bottle of bourbon. He pulled the HOA's bylaws from their website, 50 pages of self-righteous jargon, and started reading. By dawn, he'd found it. Loopholes, vague clauses about community enhancement with no oversight, no consent protocols for minors. He made calls old law school buddies, a CIVYL Liberties advocate, a reporter from the Bay Tribune, who owed him a favor. "You won't believe what this HOA did to my kid," he said, his voice low and steady. "Check it out." Within days, Daniel filed a lawsuit clean, precise, devastating. Not just for Ethan, but a class action for any minor subjected to the HOA's so-called rehabilitation. He named Diane Voss, the enforcement board, and Willow Crest HOA as defendants. He didn't lead the case too personal, but his fingerprints were all over it. The Tribune broke the story. Prosecutor's son forced to scrub homeless in HOA punishment scheme. It went VY-RAL. Twitter lit up with outrage. "This is dystopian. That woman's a monster." Then the VY-DAO leaked someone from the HOA's own ranks. Maybe fed up with Diane's reign. There was Ethan, sponge in hand, and Diane's voice, sharp and mocking. Maybe he'll think twice before playing hero. The internet erupted. Protesters swarmed the HOA building, Signs reading kids aren't pawns, and Diane must go. A bottle of hand sanitizer smashed at her feet as she fled inside. Diane tried to spin it. Standing in a tailored blazer, she faced the cameras with a practiced calm. "It was a misunderstanding," she said. The boy volunteered. "We were teaching responsibility." For a moment, it held until the footage contradicted every word. Sponsors bailed banks, local businesses, even a yoga studio down the street. The HOA suspended Diane, claiming she'd gone rogue, but the damage was done. Ethan became a reluctant icon, his image-damp hair, yellow gloves plastered across headlines. The boy who cared too much. 6 months later, the trial packed a courtroom in downtown Oakland. Diane took the stand, her composure cracking as lawyers dissected her actions. Coercion, public shaming, psychological harm. The VY played again, her laughter haunting the silence. The judge's ruling was swift. A DULA $3.1 million fine for the HOA. Diane barred from leadership roles for 15 years. Ethan's record wiped clean. It wasn't loud, Justicino cheers. No fanfare, but it was real. Outside, a reporter asked Ethan, "What now?" He paused, then said, "I want to help." For real this time. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Ethan didn't stop there. With his parents' support and a coalition of volunteers, he started Open Hands, a program for the unhouseable showers, youth-run meal stations, job training with donated suits and haircuts. At the first event, in a vacant lot under the freeway, people came hesitantly, then in droves. The gray-bearded man hugged him, whispering, "We didn't forget us." Ethan Smoleta, real one this time. Even some ex-HOA members showed up, not with excuses but with work gloves, quietly pitching in. A year later, at a community gathering in the repurposed HOA clubhouse, Ethan, now 13, stepped to a microphone. "Justice isn't always punishment," he said, his voice steady. "Sometimes at the shower, a sandwich, a chance." The crowd clapped, long and deep, and Daniel, watching from the back, wiped his eyes. Ethan wasn't just his son anymore, was a spark, lighting something bigger than either of them had ever planned. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY.